Hey everyone, I just wanted to kind of test out my webcam and the video taking software on my computer. So I'm doing it with my love of bad movies. I love bad movies. I watch them all the time. I am a huge fan of horror and that kind of thing, so there's a lot of really bad horror movies out there. So it's something that I've grown to love. So I wanted to talk about the last bad movie that I watched. It was actually today. It was called Necropolis, which, as some of you may know, that actually means the city of the dead. But basically, the whole premise of this movie is that a evil witch is reincarnated into a pseudo-punk girl in 1987 New York. And I'm going to start off by saying that I do not like the idea that she is called a witch, because she is in fact a devil worshipper, and witchcraft has nothing to do with devil worship, but that's a whole different video. But the introduction to our modern day witch is of her killing a smarmy guy in what is assumed to be an occult shop to get what she calls the ring of the devil. And with this ring, she goes around killing people, and she steals their life force, basically. And she's feeding this life force to her cult members that have inexplicably survived 300 years. Like, there's nothing telling about how they survived or why or anything, but they're these, like, gnarly, like, gross, demon-looking guys. And I just really want to mention that when feeding these cult members, she turns into a sort of demonic cow, and she retains her normal appearance, but she ends up having 6 tits. And I feel like that's worth mentioning, because that's not something that you see every day, even in bad movies. So basically there's a happily ever after, and the priest kills her, and happily ever afters always happen. There's another one that I watched a few months ago called Bite Me, and this crate of chemically altered pot ends up in this really seedy strip club called Go-Go-Asaurus. And the strippers suck. And that actually ends up becoming part of the movie, because this woman that wants to buy the strip club is like, these girls are awful, you should let me show them how it's done. And then she ends up naked on stage and, whatever. In this crate of weed are these crazy genetically altered spiders that, when you see them, they look like half of an avocado and half of a golf ball, just like kind of stuck together and painted a really dark green. And they suck the blood out of their victims, or vampire spiders. And the plot was just so poorly conceived that I don't even remember most of it, except for a wide shot of the outside of the strip club that these strippers just like live in. I've never really heard of that before, but okay. And it's so memorable because there's this wide shot, and it's called Go-Go-Asaurus, hinting at a dinosaur theme. And behind this building is a gigantic T-Rex that ends up being part of the plot. Like, the weed is in there, and I don't even really remember. It was that bad. But it looked like it was a child's toy, a toy T-Rex that's only about, like this big. And it looks like somebody just took a still shot of it and edited it behind this building that's supposed to be the seedy strip club. And that's really the most memorable part of it for me. And obviously there's gratuitous nudity, as is, the rule with horror movies. And Toxic Avenger. I wanted to talk about Toxic Avenger because the person that I watched Bite Me with also introduced me to the Toxic Avenger for the first time. And the Toxic Avenger isn't really a horror movie, but it's very bad. It's another poorly written, poorly acted movie from the 80s. And a socially awkward gym janitor is bullied, and as a result of this bullying in this movie, he ends up falling into a fuck ton of toxic waste while wearing a tutu. I don't really know why it's in there, but it's hilarious to see this, like, awkward ginger kid just walk around just like totally thinking he's the shit with his tutu on. It was really great. That was before he fell into the toxic waste. But because of this toxic waste, as we all know, toxic waste turns you into a superhero. He becomes a sort of anti-hero, though, and he's mopping up crime, if you will. And that's complete with a mop in the mouths of his victims, because he's killing these people that are doing bad things. The toxic waste kind of develops this like sixth sense for people that are bad, and he's only killing bad people and shoving a mop into their mouths. And it's really funny. And a blind girl falls in love with him after some hoodlums kill her seeing eye dog in a taco place. And I remember that the name of the taco place was really funny, but I don't remember what it is at this point. And I almost stopped watching after they killed the dog. I do not stand for hurting animals in movies. It really bothers me. But that's, again, a whole different video. But they move in together, and as with every 80s movie, there's a montage of them being very happy, and him fighting crime and coming home to this beautiful blind girl. But of course something has to go wrong, and as it turns out, the mayor of this town that they live in is in charge of all the crime, and the townspeople, he ends up wanting Toxie to be killed, because he's ruining his business. But the townspeople end up going to Toxie's rescue, and there's a happily ever after, of course. And another one that was very memorable for me was a movie called Pot Zombies. And I very highly recommend this movie just because it is so bad. Basically, this nuclear weed ends up in the hands of a bunch of people in this town. And, whenever you smoke it, you turn into a zombie. And if you're bitten by one of these pot zombies, you turn into a zombie. And it's got really great, redeeming qualities about it. There's a great punk rock soundtrack. There's, modified people in it, and that's really great to see. Like heavily tattooed women in movies is a very rare thing, and it was really cool to see that. But these zombies, they're so terrible. Basically the movie seems like, a bunch of guys got together and they got really high, and they were like, oh, we're gonna make a zombie movie, and it's gonna be like this pot turns people into zombies. And that's basically what it looks like. It looks like it's just a bunch of guys that got some friends together and a couple video cameras, and they made this movie like in this town. And these zombies are really bad. Like, they're just painted like this pea soup green, and they have CGI'd eyes, but it looks like you use the spray tool and paint, and you use neon green over somebody's eyes. Like, that's exactly what it looks like. And the shambling is very terrible. And at one point, these zombies have the presence of mind to suspend this guy. And he's, this kid with his mohawk, and he's got tattoos, and he's in his boots and braces, and he's outside tanning. I've never really heard of a punk kid tanning, but okay. And these zombies end up coming up to him when he's laying on his stomach tanning in his backyard, and they end up suspending him. And it's really cool to see a suspension in a movie that's not, about body modification. Like in Strangeland with Dee Snider, there's, very heavy mods. But, that's part of the plot. With this movie, there really wasn't a plot. It was just different instances of these people turning into zombies until the end of the world. And you only revisit characters once or twice. And it's only, a couple characters that you revisit. But it's really a bad movie, and I really want people to go watch it because it's pretty fantastic at the same time. Like, it's just really funny. And again, they have a really great punk rock soundtrack, and, people that are generally thought of as outcasts as some of the main characters. But, bad movies, they resonate with our society. They become cult classics. Like, monster movies of the 50s weren't terribly well written or well acted, and, like, Evil Dead. Everybody knows what Evil Dead is. They know that the storyline got recycled into Evil Dead 2. Everybody knows who Bruce Campbell is, and we as a society love bad movies, and I'm not afraid to say that.